Okay, folks. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and a welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be talking about 2FA, the effect of remote working, how that's changed our environments and what it is that we're doing, etc. And we're going to be joined by some esteemed panelists later on, as well as the Chief Technology Officer of SecFence, Marchand Zadari. He'll be joining us very shortly, where he'll be going through a 10-minute demonstration of how easy it is to roll out cloud-based two-factor or multi-factor authentication for your organizations. We will then follow that with a panel with two additional esteemed CISOs, Shan Lee from TransferWise and Ellie Abamoa, who's the head of IT security at Publicis Group. Before that, I'd like to kick off our session today with a short presentation by me, purely 10 minutes, just to set the scene, set the tone, and actually talk about why it is that we are talking about this in the first place. So without further ado, let me get started. As I do that, what I will say is please do ask questions. There is a question box on the right-hand side of your screen, I believe, where you can type in anything you want. Please direct them at an individual or even just a general question. We will get to them either throughout the session as and when they become relevant, or hopefully towards the end, should we have time. But the more you send us, the more we can do for you. So let me start now by kicking off with a quick scene setting presentation. It's a question of identity. That's really what the challenge is that we're facing today and what it's about. We are talking about a review of where we are today and how we even got here in the first place. So you may have seen this in a number of different places. I unfortunately don't know the original attribution. If somebody does know, please tell me. But I think this statement is very true about who led the digital transformation of your company. Was it your CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? Now, digital transformation has been a term that has been bandied around for probably, in one form or another, probably 20 years or so. 20 plus years ago, it was the paperless office. But digital transformation is the new term. And when we talk about removing paper from the office, we talk about the digital workflows underneath, etc. There's been a lot to talk about it, a lot of action, not a lot of actual moving the needle, though. Most companies were still insisting that their organizations worked from large offices in central locations. Remote working was not the norm. I think, according to various studies, it was something like maybe up to 20% maximum of the average company. And then, of course, COVID-19 hit, and there was no alternative. There was no other way that an organization could survive without sending its workforce or enabling its workforce at home. And so it is that we find that the implications of something like COVID-19 and the lockdown and the way that we have had to completely change our ways of working has actually moved the needle far more when it came to digital transformation than it has than anything else has. If we think about it, you can't just share printed pieces of paper amongst your colleagues. You can't ask for a wet ink signature. You can't move things around in the same way that you could. You can't tap somebody on the shoulder or walk up a flight of stairs to meet a colleague. So what we end up with is actually a completely different way of working in potentially a less secure environment, or an environment that you have either had to make less secure to get people to work from there in the first place, or even into a new environment, and perhaps a new cloud-based environment that you weren't quite ready for from a technology perspective. But here's the thing. We do all this, and yet the expectation is still very much on the employee to do the right thing. This is from an information security news source article. It's a mainstream one, and the advice it was giving on how we adapt and how we overcome the new challenges of this new way of working. Basically summed up with this little piece of advice, which is basically saying it's up to the individuals to ensure that they prevent the cyber attacks that might be happening. Not about really enabling them with the right tools, not about ensuring they're educated and informed, not about making sure they're even empowered to make decisions or know where to escalate them, but rather just place all of that onus of responsibility on them in the first place. It's a grand way of saying we're covering our arses, we're going to hang yours out to dry, effectively. And this is a challenge when we look at the fact that ransomware payments are going through the roof. If we look at the end of last quarter, unfortunately, the actual stats haven't come through on this this version here. But if we look at the end of last quarter, that Q4 2019, that was just over 84,000 US dollars was the average cost of a ransomware payment. So if you were hit with a ransomware, 85 grand was about how much you'd be out of pocket. The top bar there, Q3 2020, that is now nearly $234,000. It's a buyer's market, I guess, at the end of the day, in the sense that because the situation has changed so dramatically, because the way that the threat vectors have changed and how much more vulnerable our workers are, that actually the cyber criminals can ask for far more money. So going up from 84,000 to 234,000 is a huge sum of money in that case. Gone up 21%. So this is what pretty much happened. Let's just move to the cloud, shall we? Let's just enable everything through the cloud, because the cloud's secure, right? The cloud's far more secure. Everybody keeps telling us it's more secure. And well, yes, while that may be true, the old adage of your cloud platform is secure, but it's the crap that you put on it that isn't, it's actually rings far more true than anything else. And here's the reason why. If we look at the number of security incidents, this is from the Sophos 2021 threat report. There was a survey of more than 3,500 IT professionals, and it said, how many of you have suffered these incidents since you moved to the cloud? Now, what this doesn't do is talk about how it was before. It may well have gone down, but still, they are significant. I mean, even the lowest one is, nearly 1 in 5 since moving to the cloud have undergone or have had cryptojacking attacks on them. 1 in 5, and that goes up to 1 in 3 when we talk about malware. So it's not about the cloud as a platform being secure. It's about other attack vectors, and by that I mean actually in most cases it's the human being. If we look at malware, ransomware, cryptojacking, certainly all of those are almost certainly down to traditional old phishing, the delivery of user accounts, usernames and passwords, etc. And these are not protected if they're not protected in fundamental ways, such as using MFA or 2FA or other similar approaches. Then these are going to happen wherever your platform resides. So we end up in a situation where actually all the challenges are exactly the same. They're just dressed up slightly differently. It doesn't matter whether you're in the cloud, on-prem or hybrid. Really, you can't just delegate or transfer your risk entirely to someone else. There are plenty of other activities that you need to carry out in order to improve your security posture. If we look at It was a survey done for the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport in the UK as part of their cybersecurity breaches survey. Now, I know the way this web platform has interpreted the graph on here is quite interesting. It's actually, the top one is of 377 charities, and the bottom one is of 1,348 businesses. It's flipped everything around for some reason, but 1 in 4 charities does not have a password policy that ensures that users set strong passwords. 1 in 5 businesses does not have a password policy. Just think that through, and it doesn't even say how effective or how compliant that password policy is. So it might be quite simply a very basic, change it every 3 months, 8 characters, maybe throw in some special characters, and that's it. It doesn't reference at all two-factor or multi-factor authentication here. So these figures could be even worse. So even the table stakes of a strong password policy that is implemented correctly and has the right level of support and the right level of sort of technology implementation behind it is not being done. And so, we have to. This begs the question, why? Is it a technology challenge? Is it a cost challenge? Is it something else? And this problem is not going to go away. And the reason I say that is that there was a survey that was part of the impact of COVID-19 on enterprise IT security teams. It was sponsored by ISC Squared, published this month. And it said, even when everything's finished, not only 1 in 5 people would prefer to go back to the office full time. Everybody else would like to either stay at home or all the time, or be at home part of the time. Now, bear in mind the statistic I mentioned earlier on about there only being between 20 and 25% of workforce was allowed to work from home in the past. This is a massive shift. We're seeing 80% of people in this instance wanting to work from home at least part of the time, if not all of the time. So this challenge is going to get bigger. This challenge of having to support people on their own personal infrastructure outside of the 4 walls of your organization is going to be quite challenging. And so we get to this instance where actually our best practice has to evolve. There are a number of things that have to become table stakes. I liken this to the evolution of something like antivirus and encryption. If we go back 30 years, we saw that antivirus was not on every single machine. It was used sparingly because it was expensive. And when something happened, people would be running around with floppy disks to pop into the machine to remove the viruses. It then became very quickly a commodity. If your systems did not have antivirus on them, it became a problem fast. Similar thing with encryption. It was expensive and it would slow down your machine. So your full disk encrypted laptop was, next to useless half the time, as it was constantly encrypted and decrypted. Now it's a commodity. It's enabled by default on all of our smartphones. I noticed when installing the latest Mac OS, for instance, it even prompts for the disk to be encrypted as part of the install process. You can still opt out of it, unfortunately, but nonetheless, the commoditization of encryption has meant that virtually every machine out there is encrypted. And this, compared to even less than 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it's a very different story. And the same has to happen with how we actually authenticate, how we manage our workforce from a remote environment that we don't have direct control of. We need to take advantage of the fact that our people are working flexibly anyway. They will actually provide more very often more effort, more resources, more time, etc. They'll consume the content you deliver to them in different ways, and they will work more effectively and more happily through this approach of flexible working and working from home. They'll be able to achieve all of their work goals as well as their personal goals, rather than having to spend most days in the office until late at night and then resenting every moment of it. And it gets us to this point, unfortunately, is okay, so we have to pop in some technology. We have to make sure that we use a 2FA or MFA in place here. The challenge we have is here with Dr. Ian Levy, the technical director of NCSC. He likens this to medieval witchcraft, because, as he says, many vendors will quite simply say, you don't understand the problem, buy our product and we'll fix everything for you. It's medieval witchcraft or the Wild West snake oil salesman. So there is a lot to be careful about there. You do need to choose your technology partners very, very carefully. And as a result, what we're going to do now is we're going to bring on Marcin Zari from Sekfence, and Marcin is going to talk us through the Sekfence product and do his own small presentation just before we move into the panel. So, Marcin, I'm hoping that somebody will take control of the screen away from me. I need to do this, don't I? There we go. So hopefully somebody will take control of the screen away from me and put you back in control. And Marcin, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation. And there's a lot of things that I could not disagree with especially about the human beings and the way we are the weak link in all this puzzle of security. And actually, I wouldn't like to be the company, the vendor that is doing the witchcraft, and we don't treat our customers with that approach.
I should hope not.
But they actually know what needs to be done, and we just help them do it. Okay, but I promised Tom that I will give a 10 live demo about of our product that would self-describe what we do. But I just steal some time to set the stage for that. What do you actually do with Sekfence? And how we think we are completely different from what CISOs have seen so far in the field of adopting multi-factor authentication. So, and I like to start with Google. Like 3 years ago, Google has introduced these little security keys to their all 85,000 employees back then. And by doing this, they have completely neutralized account takeovers. So it was a single move that completely redefined their security strategy. And this is super important because the account takeover is responsible. I know this is obvious for most of you guys, but it's in a kill chain of more than 80% of all security incidents. So by Google by addressing that has done a huge step towards securing their environments. And I like to also quote the director of identity security in Microsoft that your passwords actually doesn't matter. You can or you cannot. I mean, sometimes I do agree with that, and the other day I don't. But what is important in here that there is. If you use password-based protection only, you sooner or later you get compromised, and it might not even be your fault. But multi-factor authentication changes a lot in that respect. And so while we've been talking to a lot of customers that we've been we've been getting feedback from about why they don't use multi-factor authentication for their entire infrastructure. Why? So if multi-factor is the non-remedy and it comes in a various shapes and forms from the newest FIDO2 crypto keys to the old RSA tokens or biometrics, you name it. Why is this not the standard policy for your entire stack in a company? And we usually got two answers that I repeated over and over, and it's because we can't control our all technology stack, which means that we haven't. There are a lot of vendors bringing technology to our environment, and so it's not like easy to do it in a unified way. And multi-factor, on the other side, multi-factor is something that our users hate. I mean, they hate us because of our password policies, and they would hate us even more if we wanted them to type one-time passwords or so. So we've been thinking, what happened at Google that actually worked? So why Google was successful in deploying this multi-factor like completely? And so we've been thinking, and there were like two facts. Google has an unlimited budget on cybersecurity and the complete control over their network, their environment, and they actually used the on the side of usability, they've used this new open standard, which is the FIDO2 security keys, or actually it was U2F back then. So it was super convenient for the user. They just touched the button on their security keys, and in most cases the environment of our customers looks like this. So it's like a completely heterogeneous environment, and in no way you could treat it in the same way that Google could control their own environment. So we've been thinking of what we could do to help those customers, how to even this uneven landscape for them, so they can create this unified second factor strategy. And so we've instead of doing this traditional way, like if it was a pre-web era, when you had to target every application one by one, and if you had like hundreds of applications you owned, it was a really difficult task, and there was not enough budget. Anyway, for doing so, we've decided to introduce this like intermediary layer that is in between the users and the applications. And once this layer is in place, you can easily deploy applications en masse, or the actual deployment. And hopefully, I'll get to the demo right now, and that would showcase the real deployment, the deployment in real time. And this is how long it will actually take in production when this layer was introduced at the customer site. So there's one. Okay, maybe I will not complicate things. I'll share my screen and show you guys how we approach adoption of multi-factor authentication on any application. I hope you can see my screen right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Sequence is a security broker. We like to call ourselves as a security broker. We put ourselves in your infrastructure. It doesn't matter if it lives in a data center or in a cloud. It's something that you own. Once we put it there, it's completely yours. And in order to upgrade any application that you own with multi-factor authentication based on Sequence, you don't need to change the code of the application. You don't even have to know where the users are coming from. So we go like beyond the initial identity, and there's no vendor lock. So everything is in between this layer that is in between the users and the applications. So I'll just maybe show you instead of talking. I like to use as a for demo. I like to use the application that the viewers would be sure that I do not control its source code. So we like to choose applications like Amazon, eBay, or some big players on the market. Sometimes this example might be confusing, but because we in enterprise customers, we usually target internal applications like CRMs or other applications where users, like internal employees or contractors or partners or their users use. But Amazon is a consumer-facing product, but I like to use this as an example to showcase that we don't touch the Amazon's code, but still we can create this protective layer for Amazon under certain circumstances. So if let's imagine Amazon is our application, is an application that you control. At least you have it in your data center or in your cloud, and you control the network traffic to it. So either by controlling the DNS or by controlling the load balancing layer. And there are 3 steps that needs to be taken in order to make this work. So just one more thing, our starting point for any application is the users that authenticate with login and password. So most of the applications in an average enterprise, even though there's a single sign-on strategy in place, in most cases there's a still login and password procedure. And with the customer that we've talked to, with the record number of applications, had 2,000 applications, and only 300 of them were part of the single sign-on strategy, while the rest were just password based. So 3 steps. In the first step, we introduce this application to Sequence. So we create some sort of representation. So I'll do the Amazon. I will create a domain name for it. So Sequence will know what to do with the traffic when it reaches it. So right now, Sequence is will know what to do if the traffic that is addressed to Amazon will reach it. In the second step, we need to make Sequence part of the conversation. So we need to network operators usually either change the DNS entry, so the original domain would point to Sequence cluster, or they change the load balancer configuration. Again, it's a very straightforward change comparing to traditional software development integration. In my case, I have a little helper that would force my machine to involve Sequence when I will try to reach Amazon. So if I go back, if I go back to Amazon, let's refresh. So my DNS seems to be cached by the browser. Okay, now the traffic flows through Sequence, but Sequence is completely blind right now. It doesn't. It's like a black box that is transferring the traffic back and forth. Nothing has changed for the users. Nothing has changed for the application. It doesn't even know there's a man in the middle in this traffic. And but now we need to figure out how this application is actually built when it comes to authentication. And we don't touch the application's code. We don't integrate in this traditional form, but we need to learn how it is constructed. So what I've just done was I've enabled the learning mode, and it forced Sequence to like open its eyes. And you can tell that even so, we're not only looking at the traffic, but we also can interfere with the traffic, with the actual content that is being presented to the users. But we still don't know how the application is built. So in order to probe that application, in order to scan it, we send a specific username, which is not known to Amazon, but we use it as a probe. And once we send that request, there's a bunch of information gathered from Sequence, both from the network layer as well as from the application side, from the front end of the application. And if we go back to Sequence and we'll hit refresh, it turns out that Sequence has found something. We only present a part of the URI, but underneath it has analyzed the entire payload again for the network and for the DOM. So if I apply what I've just learned, there's already a protective layer for Amazon, like protective layer, protective 2FA layer for Amazon. And I haven't mentioned that Sequence is method agnostic, so we can use any second factor method available on the market. We are not a 2FA vendor, although we come with two methods pre-built, like FIDO2 standard and TOTP, like Google Authenticator kind of one-time passwords. And so with this layer in place, if I get back to Amazon and I will try to log in with the same user that used to log in with password only, this time Sequence Sequence kicks in. So we are not being redirected to any external gateway. Sequence blends with the application in a way that it can provide security features on behalf of this application. So in this case, Sequence has recognized that this is the intention of authentication, and it knows what kind of user there is trying to log in. And based on the policy that we have set here, the policy is soft, which means that new user would be encouraged to enroll with second factor, but we can mix and match those. I will go with FIDO because this is that's the way that Google that's the method that Google chose and for their employees. So the ceremony of authentication is very straightforward. I have a security key in my USB port, and I will just tap the key, and that was it. So a security key has been just associated with my account. And by the way, I have not pre-populated that user. It was automatically populated when the key was associated. So it was I don't know how much time it took, but it was a complete deployment of an application plus the first enrollment of the user. So if the user will log out, and I'll clean the session so it will not wait 10 minutes, which is the default. Oh, my firewall is shouting. Sorry, guys. And this time it will. So he will recognize this is the same user that already has registered his security key, and now I'm authenticating. The ceremony of authentication is the same as the registration with FIDO, and we're good to go. So obviously, if you guys were trying to reach Amazon from your network, this protective layer would not be in place. But I mentioned that Amazon might be a bit confusing. But if this was actually the application that the enterprise controls, this protective layer could be enforced on the entire application, and it wouldn't matter where the traffic comes from. But I just wanted to show you that it's that quick to introduce the second factor. We might be doing this with another methods like TOTP. You can mix and match those methods. If the customer is already using like RSA tokens or other method, it's a straightforward process to like wrap the method, put it on the platform, and then enable it to any application without like integration one by one. And so that's the core functionality. I don't know. I probably have exceeded 10 minutes, but
just a little.
Tom, how are we with time? I have one little thing I would like to show, but if it will completely mess your schedule, I might skip it and probably have it postpone it to some.
Absolutely, it's probably a good opportunity to move to the panel. It'll give us 20 minutes or so.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing right now, and
fantastic. So actually, while let's bring up onto stage Ellie and Shan while they're working out their interfaces. Um, what do you see as the biggest pushback from your customers when it comes to MFA? Why is it? What is their concern? Marcin.
Oh, sorry. What's the? Sorry.
What do you see as the biggest pushback to your from your customers when it comes to MFA?
In general.
Yeah.
Or yeah, as I've mentioned, the 2FA is associated with the pain for the users, and it has changed with the FIDO keys. I'm a huge fan of FIDO security keys, so it has completely changed the way people think of MFA. So it's not a case anymore. But the adoption problem was always the case. So that's actually the very core reason why we've built Sequence. It wasn't just a creation of our imagination. We've been talking a lot with customers while building the initial product, and so there was always a pain with adoption. And then if you adopt it, in most cases you get vendor locked. Yeah. And what to do if your vendor does not want to play fair? Yeah, the general trap of the vendor lock. And there are certain areas. In most cases, there are areas where those customers cannot deploy 2FA at all. And these areas are mostly the hardware area. So most of the customers that we talk to have a variety of hardware like storage arrays, network gear, or lights out management systems in their servers, and they are like built into the firmware of their devices, and it's the vendor lock. I mean, it's not even a vendor lock, but the tendency of not upgrading the inertia of the vendors of upgrading those administrative panels to 2FA is huge. So they have to look for someone who can do it externally, and we try to address that.
Okay, excellent. So welcome, Shan. Say hello, Shan.
Hi, guys.
And welcome, Ellie. Say hello, Ellie.
Hello.
So the panel today is securing employees in the new work from home, anywhere, multi-cloud world. And so my starter for 10 for all of you, just to, let's pin our colors to the mast here, which is this is a no-brainer, right? This is something that we should all be doing. End of story. Why are we even talking about this?
I think go on, Ellie. No, please, just saying this is fair statement done. I was just going to say, I should, yes, can, not always. Certainly with the situation lately, there's some of us that are very lucky, and some of us that aren't so lucky. So I'm on the lucky side in that we're a technology company. We were already geared up to work from home. MFA is a part of daily life. We don't have the legacy and the, we're not a 200-year-old bank with a brick and mortar infrastructure and that's been dragged kicking and screaming into the digital age. Never mind this. So it's very easy for me to sit here and say, oh yeah, everyone should be doing this. But certainly speaking to my peers in some older environments and some more traditional financial environments, all right, maybe not the financial environment so much because security is such a high thing for them that most of them are doing this, but I get your point about the various lock-ins. It's more some of the problems that these people have had to deal with in such a short space of time, rolling out something like, bear in mind they don't all have big security teams, big IT teams even. The ability to roll out something even like the kind of stuff you used to get with the old Radius servers and that kind of thing, would be beyond their immediate means. Like these are companies that would go out and get consultancies in to do even the most basic stuff. So as much as everyone says, yeah, we should be doing it, we want to do it, we know it's important, there's an awful lot of companies that have been thrown into this work from home environment who frankly don't have a clue in-house how to do it. And consultancy's gone through the roof, in case you hadn't noticed.
Ellie, any comments?
But first, I agree with the initial statement that it's something to be expected. Meaning, you need to have the some kind of second factor or multi-factor authentication in place, because most of the attack will go after people's credentials, right? So without, or before getting into the challenge of how easy it is to do it, definitely it's a must-do, right? I don't think any business that is today serious with security can afford to no longer have MFA to protect its accounts, whether it's internal systems or even customer-facing accounts. Second, about how to do it, I understand there are two sides to the problem, right? There is what John just mentioned, which is it's complicated and IT teams have to learn on how to do it. And clearly, I think that's one of the benefits of shifting to cloud technologies, right? So today it's hard to see cloud native products or cloud solution that doesn't come with some level of multi-factor in place. Definitely, it's harder when you look at the legacy application, or sometimes you have still some controls. But again, it's kind of easy for a company that is already in the cloud or that have been shifting to the cloud. And I would say probably the same thing for working from home readiness. People that already had all their collaboration in the cloud were able probably to make a much smoother transition compared to traditional companies who still require to VPN in before accessing a legacy email server on the network, right? Yeah. Then the last component is people. Are the people ready? And what we learned through the deployment of MFA on more end is that people might be more ready than you think, meaning that regular employees or everyday users, meaning people that are not necessarily working in the field of technology, are already facing MFA for connecting to their bank, for connecting to their Google account, sometimes to their social networks. So it became something that somehow you have to use on a day-to-day basis, even sometimes to do online shopping, right? So it's not something new that we have to teach to the people, right? They know and they understand how to use it. And definitely having physical keys can make it easier, can allow to overcome some difficulties that you sometimes see with people not comfortable with sharing their personal phone with a corporate world, or people not comfortable with installing applications on, again, personal device. So again, it's not going to be everybody, but my look onto this is that people are readier or more ready than you would see.
So interesting. Well, one, I think you've been looking at my notes, Ellie, because that was one of the next points I was going to cover. But okay. Two, I think it's quite interesting. I think I was going to talk about the cultural change and the shift to MFA. Maybe that cultural change and shift to MFA, is more focused at the IT folks, the actual folks who have to implement it, rather than the end users. Then. Maybe it's the IT departments that are sort of stuck in their ways of how they view MFA should be working.
Probably yes. In many cases, when we showcase how we approach the problem, I see confusion on people's faces. I mean, they know that there are gateways that can do things for applications, but they still. Even if the company has a lot of web applications, they still think of them as if it was a pre-web era. So like applications like a typical software you have to upgrade, etc. Like they don't see that there is a standardization in the protocol, in the HTTP protocol itself, that you could do a lot within this common layer for this application. They might differ at the higher layers, but they share the same stack. And I've witnessed this a lot. I mean, there's this typical paradigm of deployment, and it was always painful. It was always time and money consuming. So there's an excuse for not doing so. And at the same time, Ellie mentioned that consumers are you, Tom, now mentioned that consumers are ready. Most of the people already unlock their device, their phone, either with their face or their fingerprint. It is a secure authentication method, and so in a few years back, only IT geeks have protected their phones with PIN codes, and in most cases, you could see people just not doing this. Right now, people are aware that what they carry in their phone is important, and they want to protect it from themselves. And by doing so, they got used to like securely unlocking their device. And we can go even further. By doing so, we can, authenticate your identity somewhere else using the same gesture.
But that's a really good point, and what I want to put to Ellie and Sham, which is one of the reasons why the MFA approach and the passcode on the phone, etc., even let's go back to encryption and antivirus in my examples. One of the reasons why they've been adopted is because they've been commoditized in the sense of when you set up your phone, it asks you to put in a PIN code. Before, it didn't. You had to go in and do that yourself. When you set up your computer, it asks you to put encryption in. So is the onus therefore on something like this on the vendors and the IT folks, or is it on the end users to be asking for this? And just to add another bit of flavour in there, there was an online account that I signed up for that actually gave a 10% discount if you enabled multi-factor authentication. What are the incentives? So it's a combination of incentive and just making it the norm. So how do we do that in a corporate world?
So there's two elements to that. There's the incentivization, so incentivizing your customers to do something when you're talking about customer-facing systems. And yeah, I think I know the vendor you're talking about. It's if you can offer a financial incentive, then if you don't get 100% uptake, someone's doing something wrong. Unless, and this is the other side of the coin, the multi-factor is such a pain in the backside that you'd rather pay the 10%, and that's the difference, right? So this is where the whole world has moved on in this space. It's now actually easier to use the more secure form of authentication. Like Face ID is a lot easier than putting a PIN code in, right? So that's the real crunch. So we've always said
it was until COVID and we had to wear a face mask.
Well, that kind of screwed it. But if you think about it, we've been preaching for years that like if the secure way to do something isn't the easiest way to do it, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's part of the argument. But I mean, nowadays, like long gone are the days where you have your secure ID token, and every time you have a glitch on the network, you fall out the VPN and you've got to get your 6 digits back in there again, and you remember your PIN. That's not how it works today. So from a convenience perspective, I don't think there is any excuse. So I think the onus is on the corporate side in order of prioritizing it, justifying spending the money. I guess it comes back to what your business is, what your vertical is, as to how much value you see on that. If you're working in finance like I do, it really is a no-brainer. If you don't have it, people aren't going to trust you. So why would you not? But if you're like some mum and pop shop somewhere with no big technical skill or anything, then it does get a little bit more complicated. And I'm totally with Marcin on the whole FIDO key thing. That to me, we over and above everything else we use, anything to do with any kind of privileged access, we do what we do for everybody else plus the FIDO key. So it's the convenience argument really has gone out the window. So now it's down to the people providing the service to just get with the program.
Anything to add, Ellie?
I think it's good to have convenience and to be able to use both, right? I'm just reacting to the comment on having a FIDO key versus having a one-time token, whether it's through a mobile app or. I don't want even to enter the debate about security of text messages, but I would say mobile-based token or push notification versus a physical device I think it would depend on user preference, and definitely having a physical token has some advantage, and I would say it brings an additional level of security. But it's also an additional challenge from a logistics perspective. Like, people can lose it, and then you have to distribute it, especially in the current condition where, I mean, I'm sure you had the same, right? But we have new hires that we never met. I mean, never came to the office because of the various lockdowns in all the geographies that we operate in, right? So sending device repair, sending keys could be a challenge. So I would say having the possibility to use both is definitely a good thing. And in the end, I think that it's some choice you want to give to your user community, right? Whatever they're going to be more comfortable with is something that they're going to adopt and use on a daily basis.
So when we're talking about, going back to the title here, and we're talking about multi-cloud environments, etc. It's we look at, say, Sekafence, which looks like a one size fits all. But is that really the case? I mean, if we're looking at people working from untrusted environments, potentially on untrusted machines, going to a variety of different locations at all times, how do you as a corporate actually, or as an enterprise, try and get your arms around those kinds of risks in the first place?
If you ask
anybody, please jump in.
Yeah, I wouldn't talk on behalf of enterprise, but I could only tell what. So probably Sean and Ellie would be better in that case.
Okay, I'll go for this one. I think what you want to do is like everything you do in security, right? It's a risk-based decision, right? So first, you want to identify your apps and try to find out what kind of, I would say, security controls and requirements you want to put in front of it. Identity, validating the identity is definitely one of them, right? You want to be sure that you have the right person. And again, if you're authenticating for, I would say, an application that allows you to process payment versus authenticating on an application that, I don't know, just shares public information, you may not want, or not need the same level of authentication strength. But I would say, again, map your application, what kind of security you want from them, and then based on that, you can define how strong of an authentication you want, but also what other validations are you requiring? Are you requiring people to work from a corporate device? Are you requiring this device to be compliant to a given policy? Do you want some kind of NAC capabilities? So all those possible requirements, I would say, can add to each other. And I think today's the ideal situation is that you want to enforce the right level of controls based on what type of applications your employees are going to access, right? So it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? If you want top security for every single application, it's going to go in the way of the users, but people will understand that some applications need more controls and need more restrictions.
Yeah, I think there's as Ellie says, there's a whole bunch of like other elements to take into account. So the multi-factor authentication, you can look at it on every layer, right? So passwords, right? We've been saying passwords are crap since there's been passwords. Right?
You're looking ahead in my notes again, aren't you? But go on.
And yeah, we've known passwords were not the right answer, but there was no other answer. I mean, you can go back 40, 50 years. Yeah. But there's also the stuff on the other side as well. So we've got that's the old bad way that we know isn't working. And then we've got this stuff that we're talking about now with multi-factor authentication, which gives us that extra layer of comfort. But then there's another layer on top of that, partly what Ellie was saying around like the device profile and making sure that everything's up to date and quarantining and updating it if it's not, and that kind of thing. So that there's an extra element of security there. But then there's also stuff that that I'm still, if I'm honest, getting my head around, things like continuous authentication. So it's all very well that someone logged in at some point, but they're working from home and they're working in an untrusted environment, and like untrusted to the point where at any point during the day, someone else could come and sit at that keyboard and carry on poking around. How do you protect against that? Because that's certainly I know is a challenge for some colleagues of mine that are from brick and mortar financial institutions, and they've got these people that are totally geared up for working in the office. And even though they've got the multi-factor authentication, they've got VPNs, they've got everything they need to work from home occasionally. But when they're working from home all day, every day, and you don't know what else is in that house, who else is in that house, how do you protect in those heavily regulated environments?
I'm also a huge fan of behavioral biometrics, but only as a part of the like a second layer of authentication, not like an initial way of trusting or not trusting the user. But again, if you have a securely authenticated user and you still want to make sure this is still the same guy behind the keyboard, the behavioral biometrics are great.
I heard about a startup that was looking at monitoring your heartbeat and the actual electrical signals from the heartbeat, having that in a ring that you could then use to do things like unlock your car. I think it was basically NFC at the end of the day, but make payments, etc. And the moment you took it off and it didn't recognize your heartbeat, it was useless. Someone else puts the ring on, it's a different ECG effectively. It's a different look at. So, from a biometric perspective, it's great. But how much will that cost? So really, Ellie, I know you've been waiting for an hour for me to ask you this: is the password dead?
I mean, eventually,
right?
Eventually, right? I mean, to some extent, you look at the systems right now, and I would say, when we talk about multi-factor, password is one of the factors. And we start to realize that the other factors are so much more convenient sometimes than the password, because you don't have to change it all the time and it changes itself. You cannot type it wrong, or it's an easier one, right? It's usually a pin or something you have to press, or your face. It's easier to work with. So if you can have a strong factor or a few factors and none of them are passwords, it actually makes your life easier. So when I think about it, yes, definitely, I believe that the future is passwordless. I agree that it's not something that the industry has figured out 100% yet, but it's probably where we're going, right? You won't have actually to type your password. There might be a password, but you won't have to know it, not to type it all the time.
Okay, so we have literally 2 minutes left. Let's round off with. So this new normal we're in right now, is this an easier future for CISOs and IT security folks? The way that we're moving now, has this digital transformation shift driven by, the head of COVID-19, has it made our life easier, or is it going to make our life easier, or actually is it making it more complex and let's go back to the old way of working?
Again, I think there's two aspects. Firstly, it depends on the business that you're in. That's obviously like a massive influencer on the answer to that question. But one good thing that I think has come out of it is at least this pretense that there is such a thing as a perimeter is dead.
Yeah.
It's finally killed that.
Finally killed it.
Yeah. Ellie.
Well, what I see when I look at the effects of this crisis is I don't see it as changing deeply changing the trends that we are already seeing, right? It's more like an accelerator, right? Yeah. Working from home, people who are slowly adopting it, using the cloud, and what I saw is that it really accelerated. I would say the digital transformation. It really accelerated the readiness from companies to consider security investments. On one hand, also, I would say made our life easier from the sense that it got us closer to the business leads, right? Because I would say the business executives that are so much focused in large enterprises on the clients, on the results, then they realize, the value and the importance of IT and security services that are not just a commodity, right? Because usually it's there, it works. You don't even, security and IT are very, very non-rewarding job, right? Meaning you're not engaging sometimes with your top executive until you have a problem. And this crisis is changing that in many ways, right? A lot more people are are realizing, I would say, how much security and technology bring to the business, and engage with us, whether it's the technology leads or security leads, on a much more frequent basis since the crisis started.
Okay.
Right? So I see that as a good thing. It made our life better, I think.
Brilliant. Marc-Jan, we're on the hour, so you've got about 10 seconds, but closing thought.
Yeah, I just wanted to completely agree with both Sean and Ellie. Completely disillusioned. We are disillusioned that there is a perimeter at all, and yeah. So that would the transparency, the truth should help us all in redefining the security in the new times.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your contributions. The hour has just flown past. Can I remind all of our audience that if you wish to schedule a demo, it's at the top up there somewhere. There is a button you can press, but also in all of your joining instructions, etc., you'll be able to reach out to SecFence directly. Once again, thank you everybody for taking part, and thank you to our audience. And with that, we will bring to end this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.